Herzlich willkommen zu Bitcoin Insights mit Philipp. In diesem Podcast vertiefe ich die Themen meines wöchentlichen Bitcoin Insights Newsletters.
Hey Peter.
Hey.
Nice that you found time to talk to me. We have right now the block time 868,557. You're already laughing. And we're here at LABITCONF in Buenos Aires on day 2. You can see it here in the background. Maybe first, please state your name plus pseudonym.
I'm Peter Todd. I'm also known as HBO Satoshi, the discount brand Satoshi.
Okay. We will talk about this in a second. But the conference here, LABITCONF, is this the first time for you?
I think it's second in Buenos Aires specifically. Probably third or fourth for LABITCONF in general.
Okay. What are your impressions so far?
She had another conference. All these people keep on speaking in this like weird language I can't understand, which is kind of annoying.
Spanish?
You know? Yeah. I think the locals like it though. So
Probably, yeah. Yeah, but it's good. Like if you speak in English, they have the subtitle, so at least they understand us if we speak.
I mean, they have the subtitle in English too. It's just I'm too lazy to read apparently.
Yeah, that's true. But honestly, to how many other people are you listening?
I mean, there was something, actually, so there was yesterday some guy doing something with satellites I couldn't quite understand that looked interesting, so. And that one, unfortunately, I don't think was subtitled.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think they record and then they publish it, and then YouTube subtitle would be better probably. I think for me actually it's the first time here. There's a lot more cryptocurrency than I thought. Like if you go out at the main hall in the booth, they're like, I don't know, 99% cryptocurrency.
I mean, LABITCONF, like one of their big sponsors is Rootstock, which isn't really Bitcoin. This doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah, that's true.
People want to go buy and sell their cryptocurrency as well, you know?
Yeah. Next week there's SatsConf in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Yep.
Have you been there before?
I was there last year, although this year I can't make it because it conflicts with OpNext.
Is it like this year, or is conference like similar, or more Bitcoin, or more, I don't know?
Maybe a little more Bitcoin, but
Okay.
honestly, I go to so many, like, asking me to remember detail of specific conferences fraught with risk.
Yeah. All right. If I'm not wrong, at 15, you began communicating with cypherpunks like Adam Beck and Hal Finney.
Well, through the Cypherpunk's mailing list.
Okay.
Not the Cypherpunk, the Blue Sky mailing list.
Which one is that?
Blue Sky mailing list. So
Okay.
that was, I think that was like created after the Freenet project community, and people want to go talk about more like Blue Sky-ish ideas around cypherpunk stuff. I don't think I was actually on the Cypherpunk's mailing list though.
Okay.
Maybe, but not that. Like no one's ever dug up any messages from me on there, so probably not.
Blue Sky, I never heard of it, but I know there is a new social media app called Blue Sky.
Yeah, no relation.
No relation.
Yeah.
At 15, what year was that?
It'd be like, 2000 or so.
2000.
Maybe I should go say about 2001, I think actually, because it was like just before I turned 16.
So right around the time the internet blew up.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell us what, like, the interaction back then, did that influence your path in any way?
I mean, everything's going to influence your path to some degree. But, it's not like I was on some mailing list, it's not like I was, talking to people who seem like great men, capable of great things, leading me in a new path. It's just, it was a discussion on a mailing list. And, I'd say, like, the ideas certainly influenced me to a degree, but how much could have really influenced me if I then went off into art school, So...
But was it more regarding just privacy, or privacy-built new currency?
My interest in digital currency at that age was because I think, like most people, I thought freedom of speech was a good thing. But I realized pretty quickly, well, freedom of speech is worthless if you don't have freedom of transaction. If you don't have freedom of transaction, how are you going to hold a protest? Who's going to pay for the signs? How are you going to go pay for your bus tickets to get there? Like, it's really basic stuff. And it's often overlooked, I think, because so much of Western politics is actually driven by people who really want control. They don't actually believe in freedom of speech or any of this other stuff. They just want more control, once they win the next election.
Very interesting. Like with whom you directly interacted, or did you directly write with Adam Beck, or is it just like the mailing list?
I think it was all through the mailing list. Yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, like at the time, I mean, it's not like I was like writing to my heroes. They were just dudes on a mailing list.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate to say this, but like Adam Back's Hashcash, it fits into the category of ideas that's so simple. I should have thought of that. Not ideas that look truly amazing. It's more like, oh, you were the guy who lucked into that idea. Good for you, but fuck, I should have thought of that.
Yeah, but it's like most of the times like this, I think.
No. There's lots of stuff out there that is genuinely brilliant, and you just read, it's like, yeah, I would have never thought of that incredible idea. I mean, I've worked as an example in geophysics at a gravity gradometry startup, and most of the work you do there is just incredibly deep ideas built on decades of incredible research. Not like, oh, well, why don't we just do a hash function and maybe like use it as a random number generator?
Yeah, and I think it's like two different things. First, have the idea, and then second, execute it. Like, for example, when I was a little child, there weren't smartphones around like an iPhone, but I had the idea of a smartphone like an iPhone before it was invented.
This is why inventions so often come out all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, Hashcash is the type of thing where the predicate to it is having hash functions actually work. That is a real solid innovation. Once you get all those pieces together, coming up with Hashcash isn't that hard. Similarly with Bitcoin, the things that made Bitcoin possible were having sufficiently fast computers and sufficiently compact digital signatures that it was reasonable to create a digital currency with a reasonable transaction volume. And, had Satoshi not thought of it, there's a good chance someone else would have too.
Yeah. Was Nick Szabo on the mailing list too?
I don't think so. And honestly, he's not that technical.
Yeah.
He is actually one of the people I think is probably not Satoshi. There's a lot of people who could be, but Nick, I was not impressed the first time I met him, probably nearly 10 years ago now. He didn't seem technical enough to really understand this stuff.
I met him last week for the first time at Plan B in Lugano.
Yeah, he
seemed like kind of a nerd. Like, it was dinner, like he was sitting on a table on a laptop and just like alone.
There are lots of nerds out there.
Very nerdy.
Oh, he was a nerd. He could have invented Bitcoin. It's dude.
No, that's not.
What was he a nerd about?
Yeah, but I think what he did, like, wasn't it one part of like why Bitcoin is working?
Not necessarily. I mean, it seemed, for what we know, Satoshi didn't seem to take a lot of inspiration from things that were going on that you might have expected Satoshi to know about. Because
he didn't reference them.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's maybe like he wanted not to reference them, or do you really think
Satoshi referenced Hashcash and like reached out to Adam to make sure the citation was correct?
That could be a reason. Yeah.
Like, my guess with Bitcoin is it's something that was just invented by some random guy, and probably not a dissimilar situation I was. Well, lots of people would think, obviously, digital currency is a good idea. How are you going to do it? And if anything, I think Satoshi was probably not on the mailing list and other stuff where digital cash was discussed, because a lot of the ideas we discussed were kind of crap. They kind of led you down the wrong path.
Yeah. You recently started an HBO show playing Satoshi Nakamoto. What was that experience like for you?
Well, keep in mind, Cullen didn't tell any of us what he was doing.
Yeah.
And also, I strongly suspect that Cullen did not intend to make a documentary about finding Satoshi. I think he actually meant to create a documentary about the rise of Bitcoin. Probably filmed, a couple thousand hours of footage, was sorting through them, realized it didn't work as a documentary, and then came up with the Satoshi angle for marketing reasons. That's probably also why he picked me, because, in the marketing, a lot of emphasis was on how, this Satoshi candidate, you wouldn't expect it. Well, how do you make that true? Well, you just pick a random dude who you kind of get the most barest evidence to link them. And all right, that's Satoshi. And then it turns into a media circus and you get a lot of people watching your documentary. Because otherwise it would have just been yes, another Bitcoin documentary, probably would have gotten no attention.
But didn't he had some at least good points regarding you being Satoshi?
They were, the evidence is just so threadbare. All it is I happen to go reply to Satoshi at the right time. Lots of people reply to people, a good way to think about it is there's probably on the order of 10,000 people who could have made Bitcoin. You're going to have coincidences.
That's true.
And it's ironic because Cullen's previous documentary was about the QAnon conspiracy, which has all the same kind of conspiratorial, coincidence-based thinking. Sorry, coincidences happen. Really doesn't mean much. Truth is, we'll probably never find Satoshi because they don't want to be found. And, being anonymous on the internet is not that hard. As long as you're reasonably competent, it really isn't that hard to post stuff and get away with it.
I don't want to go too deep into that because actually I don't want to know who Satoshi is. I don't think it's you. But I think it was mentioned in the documentary too that when you were 15 years old, you wrote something which is kind of similar to Bitcoin. No? It sounded like this. It sounded like you're a genius. With 50 years old, you wrote something, a document, an email, I don't know, which outlined Bitcoin, which was then coming up 8 years later.
That email, the closest thing I did to outlining Bitcoin was pointing out the kind of obvious points that an audit trail of digital signatures could have something to do with making a currency. But, that falls in the category of things so obvious, you're going to invent it if you try to invent Bitcoin. It's hard to imagine how Bitcoin could exist without something like that. But a lot of people are going to invent that.
Yeah.
The important part of Bitcoin, I failed at coming up with. And so many other people did too.
Do you know who Satoshi is?
Yeah, it's you.
Sorry?
Yeah, it's you.
We all are, okay.
No, you specifically. So
yes.
You are trying so hard to avoid being fingered as Satoshi by pretending to be, a bumbling guy who doesn't really understand the tech, going around at conferences, interviewing people about Satoshi. It's a perfect disguise.
Yeah,
and also, I know that you were working with Cullen's cameraman, who kind of got burnt out after creating Bitcoin, and then decided to go into documentary filmmaking. It's a perfect disguise, man. Are you Satoshi?
Maybe, of course not. Maybe it's.
That's what Satoshi would say.
Yeah. Okay, I get your point. So the HBO documentary claimed you are Satoshi Nakamoto. Wired wrote you were in hiding because of that. Is the media primarily driven by clicks and revenue and doesn't care about the truth?
Yeah, Wired just made that up. And it's not even like they made it up after doing some research. They went in context by email. I told them what was going on.
Yeah.
And then they probably realized, oh, well, that's not a very good story. All right, Peter Todd, he's in hiding now. And why would Wired do that? Because Wired missed the deadline to go and write an article about it when the news broke. And they had the strategy of, well, let's see if we can write an article about it 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, well, what are we going to write about? Well, let's hope the guy's gone in hiding. That'd make for a good article.
Yeah, a lot of media covered this and said, here, he's actually in hiding. And then I wrote you and you said, no, what the fuck, I'm at a conference right now.
Yeah. Well, so when Wired published that, the same day, probably only 2 or 3 hours later, another mainstream media outlet emailed me saying, but Wired said you're in hiding, yet you're at a conference right now.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. That's really terrible. The media coverage. I get the HBO docu that they have to put a label to you or to someone. We found Satoshi Nakamoto because
no, they don't have to put anything. They can just not do their documentary and lose, they probably spent $500,000 on plane flights.
You're right, but with this, they sell it. A lot of clicks, a lot of views. And
they don't have to. Don't say they have to.
No,
they are incentivized by fraud.
Yes. Of course, they don't have to, but that's what you...
No one's putting a gun to their head. Their business could just fail.
Right. But that is something you would expect. If you kick here, then the camera is shaking. And so I think that's something you could expect, the stuff we see from the central banks like the ECB.
Yeah. I could also expect you to go beat up some little kids for lunch money. You have a strong financial incentive, and you are more than strong enough to beat up a 5-year-old.
Yeah, that's true. But like, I think the HBO, they have a lot more to gain than me beating up small kids.
I mean, if you somehow go and scale it.
Okay, so I go every day from school
Yeah.
to school
Yeah.
and beat up little children for the lunch money.
Yeah.
Do they have actually cash right now, or do they use like Bitcoin or credit card for buying their...
I mean, you can always just extort them for the private keys.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Maybe a good business model. I will think about this. You submitted your first bit of code to Bitcoin Core in April 2012.
Yeah, that's probably about right. Although, granted, I mean, that first bit of code was correcting a grammar mistake in like a help message.
Ah, okay. But yeah, you're the 11th highest contributor to Bitcoin Core's GitHub repo.
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised at that number because I haven't contributed that much. I mean, what it actually says is, well, you know, Bitcoin Core has a lot of contributors. The people who've actually contributed a reasonable amount are a small number.
Yeah. Which of your contributions do you believe have had the most significant impact on Bitcoin's development?
That's an interesting question, actually, because there's two candidates, which is sort of the two only notable things I've actually done on Bitcoin Core. Maybe more, but like the two things that really make an impact is check lock time verify, and then replace by fee.
BIP65 and BIP 125.
Yes, although BIP 125, I mean, we didn't really need a BIP for that, but you know, replace by fee is used. I mean, like in terms of actual active replacements, I think it's like 10-ish, 20-ish% of all transactions these days. Probably more like 10-ish. I'd have to double check the stats. And it varies, of course, depending on mempool conditions. But it's a very common idea, and you know, I really helped like push that.
No.
And then check lock time verify. That's used in Lightning. So usually it's not needed, but every Lightning channel there is a path where it could close with a check lock time verify in the HTLC handling. So yeah, I mean, those two things are important. But on the other hand, you know, that's just one part of many in Lightning. Similarly, replace by fee is just one part of many in how Bitcoin things do transactions. So, you know, like all this stuff, like individual contributions make a difference, but it's rare for they by themselves to make a huge one. I mean, inventing Lightning was a pretty big contribution, but you still had to have people implement it.
Did not Satoshi like outline Lightning?
No, Satoshi, according to Mike Hearn, which is a disputed statement, Satoshi had ideas around payment channels. Now, one issue there is Mike Hearn's never done some basic steps to help authenticate the emails he claims he received from Satoshi. So they could be fakes. And Mike Hearn potentially had the political motivations to fake those emails. So I'm not going to say there's proof there. But certainly the original behavior event sequence, you could argue it was something kind of like payment channels, but not in the same way though, because the in sequence thing, to use it as payment channel, you had to have the channel itself kind of sitting in mempools, which is not efficient. Lightning, the way we use it these days, is far, far more efficient. So, yeah, I mean, maybe some very early steps towards it, but Satoshi didn't figure out the secret to payment channels. Other people did.
Okay. What about BIP63 sales addresses?
Well, I mean, I just wrote up like a rough outline of an idea other people already had. You know, my only role there was saying we should actually go do it. And I failed at that. Like, other people were the ones who have actually pushed that forward.
Okay. In 2016, you published together with Giacomo RGB, which stands for really good for Bitcoin. Is it true?
Did I actually publish that with Giacomo?
I don't know, it says in the internet.
Yeah, that might be a misunderstanding. I mean, I published the ideas that led to RGB, but actually publishing that, I think it might have been just like him and other people separately, like referencing my ideas. I'm not going to take credit for that. I can take responsibility. If it doesn't work, it's my fault. But you know, for actually coming up with RGB projects, I think that's probably fair to say is mostly is mostly their initiative. I mean, obviously, like I helped those guys early on with some consulting and kind of how it could look, but you know, it's their thing. Like they're the ones who've done the hard work.
Who?
Well, I mean, Giacomo is one of them. I think Maxime's the main one. And other people around that. So, I had my own project called Proof Marshal, but that has not progressed anywhere near as much as RGB has.
Can you still explain what RGB is and its potential impact on the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Well, so RGB is an implementation of an idea I did seem to come up with called client-side validation. And it's the observation that you can create a consensus system that leverages an existing consensus system by using the existing one for double spend prevention. And basically what that means is RGB lets you do things like create tokens or coins that can be merged and split, and then the transfers between people are handled by spending Bitcoin UTXOs that commit to these tokens. And that itself is an entirely new idea. Like colored coins, I think it's fair to say they kind of pioneered some of that concept. But RGB is a far better implementation of this because it abstracts the notion of double spend prevention to this idea of a single-use seal. And what's key about that is if you have this layer of abstraction, you can get far better scalability because one single Bitcoin transaction can allow many seals to be closed at once. So taken to the extreme, RGB could absolutely do literally billions of transactions per second. Now the trust model is slightly different than Bitcoin because in RGB, it's untrusted with respect to the validity of a coin, but in this scalability model, it can be trusted with respect to censorship. Now, if you're an exchange and you run your own aggregator, you're not going to censor yourself. But if you're someone just using an RGB token in this scalability model, you might be potential subject to censorship for the people you agree to use their aggregation service. And, frankly, it's all a little complex. I mean, if you want to read more, I have a blog post on this from 2017 outlining in detail like how all this works. I don't think it specifically mentions RGB, but that is the concepts RGB is based on.
Okay. What's the way forward with it?
I mean, the way forward is to implement it and do it. But, the thing is, from the Bitcoin point of view, these concepts by themselves, they can't make Bitcoin move. They can implement tokens, they can implement other types of consensus system, but they can't directly make a Bitcoin move. So it's not actually relevant to the Bitcoin community directly.
Okay. As the founder of Open Timestamps, you are the founder, right?
Yep. That's all my fault.
That's your fault. Could you explain its purpose and how it leverages the Bitcoin blockchain?
Well, so cryptographic timestamp proofs, what they do is they prove that data existed before a point in time. And the way that open timestamps works is it basically uses hash functions. There's a hash function, the input is hashed when you create an output, and the output is sufficiently big that there is no feasible way for humanity to find two inputs that map to the same output. And I'm simplifying a bit there, but that's roughly the capability there. So, the input leads the output. But since the output is smaller than the input, you can then combine two inputs using the digest and thus scale. And that creates a Merkle tree. So what can you do with that? Well, you can take a very large amount of data, many individual items of data, and eventually create a Merkle tree leading to one single 32-byte digest. And then you put that digest in a Bitcoin transaction, which will wind up in a Bitcoin block. And then finally, at the end of all this chain, you have a Bitcoin block header, which has the time in it. Now, at the beginning of this, you went and said time and block height, which is kind of a dumb gimmick. Let's face it, it's not useful. What is useful is that Bitcoin miners put the time in their blocks. And that allows us to go say, hey, this piece of data existed before this Bitcoin block, and this Bitcoin block has this claimed time in it, and due to the incentives of Bitcoin and the widely witnessed nature of Bitcoin, we can say that time is reasonably accurate. Now you can prove that piece of data existed in the past. Well, why is that useful? Well, because the bad guys don't have time machines. I don't know if you walked around here, but like there's a beautiful looking DeLorean, and the thing is, it doesn't work. Like I tried sitting in it, and I could not make it go back in time. So long as that's true, if we can show data exists in the past prior to some potential attack, manipulation, whatever, we can rule out those bad things happening to it, and thus have a better idea of how valid the data is. What's nice about this is, since timestamping is so scalable, I can make it free. So you should timestamp your data. Why not?
Who's using it right now?
Well, probably the most high-profile example was timestamping the Guatemala election. So what happened there is, Guatemala election is paper ballot system. You fill out your ballot, put it in a ballot box. When the election is finished, they take the boxes in front of a ton of observers, they tally up the ballots, and they go and add up those numbers, put them on ballot tally sheets. Then those tally sheets get scanned in and uploaded to a central database. What we did is we timestamped those tally sheets as they were created to constrain when they could have been created. So why is this useful? Well, funny enough, and I'm simplifying a little here, but basically speaking, the ruling party of Guatemala, they thought they might lose the election, so they intentionally did ballot fraud in some places to try to claim that the election was thrown off, thus it should be redone. And long story short, that would have given them like another 6 months of campaigning.
No.
Well,
Great idea.
Open timestamps in that case, the vast majority of these ballots, we could say, hey, via Bitcoin and other mechanisms, these ballots were timestamped within 30 minutes, an hour of when the election closed. That's consistent with what should happen. They should be opened up, they should be counted, you should have your results quickly. Whereas in a small number of cases, they were delayed by hours. Well, the small number of cases is ones where the election fraud claim happened, but the size of that was small enough, you were able to give convincing evidence, no, the election results are accurate. We only need to rerun elections in small parts. And long story short, eventually once all the court cases settled, the ruling party lost power, and they've had a peaceful transition to power. So, open timestamps helped give yet another piece of evidence that the election did in fact work.
Maybe the US should look into it.
They definitely should. It's unfortunate El Salvador didn't, but the story I heard was they were a little skeptical about having Bitcoin involved in their elections, because from third parties it looks like somehow they're using Bitcoin to maybe steal an election or something. Yeah. It's kind of bullshit, but this isn't the first time people have pushed back on open timestamps because they thought it was somehow promoting Bitcoin or controlled by Bitcoin or something.
Yeah. In September, you published Soft Fork Covenant Dependent Layer 2 review.
Yes.
You will talk about it later here.
Yes, I will.
Can you break down its key points in layman terms?
Why that paper exists is, first of all, Falker Ventures, a VC firm, they paid me to go and write it. And then why they paid me to go write it was because there's this whole new generation of L2 systems coming out that the idea is they improve on Lightning. And Lightning's key limitation is that you need at least one UTXO per Lightning channel, which in the case of a general user really means at least one UTXO per user. If you have Phoenix Wallet, you own a UTXO, and that UTXO is your Lightning channel. And if you want to have more than, depending on the numbers, 1 billion people using Lightning, you're going to need something better than that because you just don't have enough space to open that many Lightning channels. Good examples, let's suppose we allocate 90% of the Bitcoin blockchain to opening Lightning channels. We can only open 1 billion of them a year. Now, there's probably on the order of 4 to 6 billion people in the world who have smartphones, so, this actually gets us pretty far. If you don't have a smartphone, that's sort of the bare minimum requirements to use Lightning directly. But it would be nice, for a lot of reasons, if we could improve on this. And that paper really looked at the spectrum of L2 solutions out there, also defined what an L2 is to begin with, and then also looked at what sort of covenant opcodes and other features that you could add to Bitcoin to then make these things more feasible. So it's quite a technical paper, but the big conclusion there is there aren't that many L2s that make any sense. ARC is kind of the most exciting one out there. that maybe could do something interesting. Lightning itself is actually pretty good. I think a lot of people underestimate how far Lightning can scale. And if we're going to do a new opcode, check template verify seems to be the most reasonable option we have for covenants. It's not a perfect option, but it's the best people have come up with so far.
Yeah. You should have presented this paper in El Salvador at Adopting Bitcoin. You will not.
Yeah, well, you mean the upcoming one?
Yeah.
Well, the upcoming one, they uninvited me because they're crazy code of conduct, which is a whole funny story in of itself. But last year I was at Adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay. And the code of conduct, is it new? So was it in place last year?
Well, this is something, frankly, the reason this is being added, from what I can tell, is because there's at least one person in the Adopting Bitcoin, administration, whatever, who really doesn't like Israel. But what the code of conduct actually says is you cannot promote physical violence against other people for any reason, either inside or outside the context of the conference. Of course, Bukele violates this code of conduct. He has literally put 1% of the entire El Salvadoran population in jail.
Yeah.
That is physical violence. And, the argument there is, I'm sorry, physical violence is justified in a lot of cases. Criminals, they need to be prosecuted. I mean, if someone's fighting a war against you, you damn well should be fighting back. And from what I hear, they were not happy at my support of Israel, and that's really what it comes down to. I've heard through the grapevine that Israeli Jewish speaker also got uninvited, and in that case, it sounds like that guy didn't want to make a fuss about it. But I'm quite happy to say this is a ridiculous code of conduct, and what I've heard talking to other people involved in adopting Bitcoin is, not many of the people in adopting Bitcoin think this is good code of conduct. It's just so ridiculously broad, and it really more exists to just pick and choose people who who some people don't like and get them uninvited. But it is what it is. I mean, I'm going to 7 conferences in a row.
Yeah.
Conference and events in a row. So it's not like I really need to get more of them.
Yeah, I will be in El Salvador for the conference. It will be my first time there.
I'll be in El Salvador again for the Plan B conference in January.
Yeah. I try to be there too, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
All right, to wrap it up, what's your current perspective on the best way for individuals to acquire and secure Bitcoin?
Ooh, that's a hard one. And it's not like hardware wallets is, you're a nice, easy answer there. The thing is also, it depends on what amount you're talking about. It's a very different answer if you're in North America and you're trying to buy $100,000 with Bitcoin versus you're in El Salvador and you're trying to go and save $1 at a time.
Yeah, let's say $1,000. No one should buy $100,000 at once if he doesn't have much more money than this.
Well,
DCA is better, I think.
Yeah, I mean, dollar cost averaging is good, but
yeah.
Let's suppose hypothetically you have $1,000 and you want to go and buy Bitcoin. I mean, honestly, the obvious thing to do there, given that $1,000 is not actually that much money, is just go and download a reasonable phone wallet like Phoenix and dump it on there. And the nice thing about something like Phoenix is you have true custody over your funds, and you can also spend them with Lightning.
Yeah, but where do I get the Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, it depends where you live. As an example, if you're in Canada, around my apartment in Canada, within about maybe 200-300 meter radius, there's something like 3 Bitcoin ATMs that you can put cash in and get Bitcoin out.
Very expensive.
Yeah, but
it's 10% fee.
No AML, no KYC.
If I use Vexel.
Oh, it's very expensive. 10%. Come on, man.
if I go on
Bitcoin,
Vexel,
don't you believe Bitcoin's going to go up more than 10% in the next year?
Yeah, of course, but if I can easily buy it much more cheaply, then I'm stupid to pay 10% extra.
Yeah, but I mean, your time matters too. If you use Vexel, and believe me, I love Vexel, but if you use Vexel, are you actually going to get around to doing it, or are you going to maybe delay it a bit because you're trying to go set up a trade, maybe the guy flakes on you? Honestly, I think a lot of the answer is just do whatever works for you and make it happen. Don't get caught up in, what's the perfect way to go buy Bitcoin? No, just buy the damn stuff.
What do you think personally about crypto custody by companies, by institutions? Crypto custody.
Oh, crypto custody. Well, so for companies, this tends to make a lot of sense because, for a company, there is no such thing as genuine, like, I guess what I'd say is, like, for a company, companies don't really have custody in the way humans do. If you're an individual person, you can do things on your own behalf. That's clearly the things you are doing for yourself. Well, if you're a company, everything that happens on behalf of a company is done through employees.
Yeah.
So how different is it really to outsource that to a company that maybe has better expertise than trying to go find the guy at the company who understands how to go install a Bitcoin wallet? There isn't a clear difference between the two. One way or the other way, it's happening through a third party. The third party might be an employee, but with respect to the company itself, it's still a third party. And honestly, I think this is why crypto custody solutions, there is always going to be a big market for them because it's a very hard thing for companies to easily do for themselves.
Yeah, that's true. And
a company is made up of third parties.
Sure. And like our German Bitcoin Association is the same, right? We have 7 board members.
Yeah.
What we do is we have multi-sig. We have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So that works quite well.
And you do it because any one board member by themselves would actually be a third party.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, say you're sole owner of a company. Well, then this becomes a very different discussion.
Sure.
But I think we're talking about multiple people, corporations here.
Yeah. Perfect. That's it. Like, do you have anything to add?
No. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here.
See you around.
Ciao.
Wenn dir die Folge gefallen hat, freue ich mich, wenn du den Kanal abonnierst und der Folge einen Daumen nach oben gibst.